I don't love my new boobs, I'm not gonna lie. Saggier, I hate that word. I'm gonna go through a lot of emotions. Today I'm going to be talking about what to expect when you stop breastfeeding your baby and some things that I experienced when I stopped feeding my youngest son, Jasper. So if you want to hear all about that, then keep on watching. So before I start the video, someone outside is doing some banging, there's some work going on, so if you can hear some like thumping and banging, please do ignore it. But I really wanted to get around to filming this video because it's been a couple of months now since I had to think then. It's been a few months since I've stopped breastfeeding my youngest son, Jasper, and I just wanted to kind of wrap it up. I might do my breastfeeding journey as well. When I looked on YouTube a little while ago, there weren't that many videos about what to expect when you stop breastfeeding. So if you want to hear all about my experience of stopping breastfeeding and some things that you might experience when you stop feeding your baby, then do keep on watching. Hello, if you're new around here, then my name is Grace and I'm a mum to two little boys. Elliot is nearly 2.5, and Jasper is 1 year old. And I breastfed both of my sons up until literally the week of their first birthdays. I've done my breastfeeding journey videos as well, so I will link those for you. But I wanted to touch upon briefly in this video the symptoms that you can expect and some things that might happen to you when you actually stop breastfeeding. So obviously for me, I've breastfed up until a year, so some things might be slightly different if your child is older or younger, but for us a year is literally like the perfect place to stop. Both my sons were really ready to finish feeding at a year, so I'm just going to talk about some things that happened. For reference, when I stopped feeding Elliot, I was quite heavily pregnant with Jasper. There's only 14 months between them, so I didn't really have a lot of these symptoms. But I think because my body probably didn't even stop producing milk, because I think Elliot was 1 in the May and then Jasper arrived in the July, so my body probably didn't even stop, as I say, and I didn't experience this as much. I had some of these symptoms, but let's get into some things that I've experienced in the last few weeks since I stopped feeding Jasper. So the first thing, and probably the most obvious if you're a breastfeeding mum, is to go through a lot of emotions when you finish your breastfeeding journey. And the most obvious one is a lot of sadness, because it is such a lovely, well, for most mums, I'm generalising, but if you've made it up to a year especially, it can be a really lovely, overwhelming journey. And I think as well that when you stop feeding, like breastfeeding, it really does feel like you're closing the chapter on your kind of, well, not just your breastfeeding journey, but it almost feels like you're closing that chapter on your baby being solely dependent on your body for their nourishment and comfort. And you can feel a lot of sadness, especially in the final few feeds when you know that it's about to finish. As I say, because we always aimed for around a year, and it literally just so happened that both my sons finished breastfeeding on the week of their first birthdays. It was just, they were just ready for it, which I've spoken about in my breastfeeding journeys. Even if you stop breastfeeding gradually, you can expect to feel some amount of sadness. You might feel relief if for a while you felt quite ready to stop breastfeeding. I was ready to stop breastfeeding. I wouldn't say that I felt relief, but there was a sense of getting my body back and just moving on to the next stage in Jasper's sort of babyhood, really. It always does feel like when you stop breastfeeding, you're saying goodbye to that baby. And for me, I think the most magical part of breastfeeding is definitely the first 6 months, when you are the sole provider of their nourishment and things like that. Obviously when they get to 6 months, they're getting nutrients and whatnot from food and stuff, and you know that you've given them all of those amazing immune boosting goodness from your breast milk. But yeah, you can feel sadness, relief. You might even feel a lot of pride in that you've reached a certain milestone, whatever that is for you. 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 days. These are some things that you can feel when you actually stop breastfeeding. I think a few weeks before, every time I finished breastfeeding Jasper, I felt very tearful and very sort of sad, bittersweet, knowing that it was going to be one of the last times of feeding him. And it is just such an amazing thing. I absolutely have loved breastfeeding both my sons, but I think a year is the perfect time for us to stop. The second most noticeable thing that I experienced when I stopped breastfeeding Jasper was I had a lot of acne flare-ups. Now, I'm not sure if this is just me in particular, because my skin is quite prone to flare-ups. I think it's when you've got a lot of hormone changes. Even though I did stop breastfeeding really gradually, my skin was quite bad for a while after I stopped. That might just be coincidence, but if you experience that, that might be something to do with stopping breastfeeding. Obviously, there is going to be a lot of changes in your body, like your hormones are literally stopping making the milk. Just so you know as well, something else you can expect, even once you and your baby have actually stopped feeding, I was still producing milk for probably a month after I stopped, because obviously you can check yourself if you're still producing the milk. My body was still not, it obviously probably wouldn't have made very much, but if you stopped and you decided you want to feed again, quite often, unless your supply has completely dried up, I was still producing milk for a little while after I fed Jasper. I think about a month after is when I actually noticed that when I squeezed my nipple, there was no more milk that was coming out. So you can expect to still produce a little bit of milk, or you might expect it might just dry up. It really does depend. So yeah, for me, I got a lot of acne after I finished feeding. And following that point and talking about hormone changes, something else that you might want to expect. If your periods have returned, you might expect a little bit of disruption to your cycle. My periods had been back for a while and they were being quite regular. When I stopped breastfeeding, I've noticed that my cycle has changed a little bit. Could be coincidence. I know that the first year or so after you have a baby anyway, I think the periods are a little bit irregular, but you might notice a slight change in your cycle after you stop breastfeeding. I think I was going about 5 weeks a cycle, and now it's like 6 to 7, but that could just be my body picking up its normal pattern anyway, so I don't really know. So just keep a watch on your menstrual cycle as well, because that might change after you stop breastfeeding. Could be coincidence. Obviously everything is really circumstantial, and it's going to be individual to your own body, so you know your body, but just keep an eye on that if you're like not looking to get pregnant, or you're just keep an eye on your cycle, I'd say. The last thing that I would say that you can expect when you stop breastfeeding is to experience some changes in your body. Your body is going to start adjusting to its new normal. I had a really, really good milk supply with both my boys. I had amazing breasts when I was breastfeeding. I loved my boobs when I was feeding both my boys. But obviously with those lovely big breasts comes a lot of kind of extra skin, which I'm now left with. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't really love my post breastfeeding body anymore. I'm getting used to my new body basically. I expect to see some changes in your body. Obviously, as I say, there's sort of my skin is not as firm as it was, and I don't really think any lotions or potions would change that. It's quite stretch marky, my bust area, and it's obviously not as perky as it was. But do you know what? I fed I fed both my children for a year, and I take that over the amazing boobs, even though they were really good, because that's just an aesthetic thing, isn't it? And knowing that I provided them with nourishment and, like I say, all of the goodness in my milk and comfort, that sort of thing. And I just generally loved breastfeeding. So you are going to have some changes in your body. You might also find that you might put on a little bit of weight, or you might lose some weight. I think I haven't really noticed that, but I have heard that that is quite a common thing when you stop breastfeeding. So yeah, I don't love my new boobs, I'm not going to lie, and they are going to take some getting used to. But that is just a physical thing that I've got to get my head around. And as I say, I'd take that any day over not being able to breastfeed. I'm just really thankful that I was able to feed both of them. But I thought I would point that out, that obviously after a while, I think it will take a while for your body to actually kind of maybe adjust to its new normal. But yeah, your body's going to change after you stop breastfeeding slightly. I mean, I don't know how much, if that will affect everyone, but I know that I did have a good supply with both my boys, so it probably, I think that and in pregnancy your breasts get bigger anyway, so I'm not sure if that's just breastfeeding. It might be pregnancy and breastfeeding is then going to make your breasts Obviously a little bit saggier. I hate that word, but I'm not going to lie, that is a word to describe them, like deflated balloons. But you know what? I've got a lot of qualities and my breasts are not really high on the list. I've fed my 2 children and that's the most important thing to me. But hopefully that won't make you feel too upset, but I would just point out that your body will change slightly. You might see some stretch marks appearing, looser skin, unfortunately. But yeah, it's such a shame that you can't keep your breastfeeding boobs after, as a little reward for like all your hard work. And that's all the things that I'd say you can expect in like yourself and your own body. And a few things that I've noticed for Jasper, my son, I didn't really notice this with Elliot very much, is that in the few weeks after, not straight away, but he's been quite clingy to me. He's always been quite a like sensitive baby anyway, but he's sort of clung to me and he follows me around. So he's almost like trying to get his comfort from me in different ways now. He does get a little bit of separation anxiety, but like I say, he's always had that, and it's not just to do with the breastfeeding, but you might notice that those things reoccur, like they reappear after you stop breastfeeding. And another thing is that even though we'd introduced a bit of milk to Jasper, is that it's taken him a little bit of time to get used to like having different milk. So he's taken a few weeks to start having cow's milk and that kind of thing. So you will notice some changes in your baby too. And as long as you're both ready to stop, I think that's the most important thing. And I always feel as though you will know when your child is ready to stop. Some things that will be a good indicator is that like their feeds will become like less frequent and shorter. They'll be distracted and they just won't be looking to you for that. I know that my boys were both more than ready to stop. It is a sad experience, but I just thought I would talk you through some things that have happened to me since I've stopped breastfeeding. Hopefully you'll find this useful. Let me know, have you experienced any of what I've talked about, or have you experienced different things? I'd love to know in the comments section down below. If you like content all about mum life and you're not already, please do consider becoming a subscriber of mine. I'd love to have you. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.